Thanks everyone for joining us. Today, I want to take you through our DISA STIG automation. Let me explain a little bit about who I am and introduce my co-panelist. My name is Brian Hutchinson, the Global Account Manager for the defense sector and federal government globally. I've been working with US DoD and US federal government customers for several years now. And I've been helping them with automation, specifically around DISA STIG and other types of automation. And so that's why I'm going to take you through the product today. But let me introduce my colleague, Wade Carlson, who's my technical counterpart. I'm based in Europe myself, and probably from my accent, you can tell that I'm Australian. Wade is based in the US, but across to you, Wade.
Yeah, hi everyone. Wade Carlson. As Brian mentioned, I am based in North America, North Idaho to be specific. So, I've been with Runecast a little over 4 years. I have an extensive background in VMware virtualization technologies, working for Fortune 50 companies, etc. So, really, my role in Runecast is to showcase the product, talk from a technical perspective on how it functions and how it works, and ultimately how it can help you and save you a lot of pain in your day-to-day process from an SE perspective. So thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Wade. And let's try to keep this as interactive as possible. If anybody has any questions as we're going through, we're going to be monitoring the Q&A or the chat box as well. And rather than store up questions till the end, it'd be great if you can just ping us with any questions and we'll answer those as they come in as well. So one of the things I want to show to you in the beginning is how to deploy Runecast and how simple that is. It really is a 5-10 minute sort of deployment. Very, very simple. Runecast covers a bunch of different technologies, but most of you are going to be most interested in VMware coverage and perhaps Windows and Linux as well. But Runecast covers VMware, operating systems, so Windows and Linux, Kubernetes, and then major cloud providers like AWS, Azure, GCP as well. And it gives you a unified view across all of those. So it will deploy natively into any of those supported technologies. But for most of you, you're going to be looking at deploying into a VMware environment where Runecast just, you download it from your Runecast account. And this is an example of my Runecast account. So I would just download the OVA from there and I would deploy it into my into my VMware environment as a virtual appliance. It's a really simple deployment. For this webinar, I'm just going to use this online demo lab that anybody can access from our website and sort of play with Runecast without actually deploying it. It's going to be enough for me to show you through the product. So when I deploy that OVA, I would be greeted by a wizard that would step me through connecting my vCenters and spinning up the rest of the product. And to do that, all that you would do is add a vCenter. All you need to enter is your FQDN or IP address, username and password, hit continue, and that vCenter would be added. The next thing that you would want to do is to set up the log analysis. And here, once you've added the vCenters, you will see each of the vCenters that you've added. You would come in here and just using this spanner symbol, check the boxes for the host that you want to configure the log analysis for. The log analysis in Runecast is quite different to other tools like Log Insight or Splunk, and I'll explain that as I go through. The other thing that you can do here is to add the VMs themselves. What we do with the logs is we correlate them in real time against the VMware knowledge base. So this really kind of finds the needle in the haystack that engineers would normally spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's gone wrong in the logs, and from there to get to a KB article that's going to help them. We just cut all of that out by just immediately flagging any logs that have problematic behavior or any patterns that match to a known issue. And we can pick up some of that at the VM level. So you can add the VMs as well. The last thing you'd want to do is set up the automatic scheduler. So you can configure Runecast to scan hourly or daily or weekly. You can select what times you want it to scan. Typically, a daily analysis would be enough because you can always trigger a manual scan whenever you want. So we'd certainly recommend that you set up at least a daily analysis, and this will allow you to build up really good historical data in the application as well, because it runs fully on-prem in your VMware environment. It doesn't upload any data from that environment, and it's designed for air-gapped deployment. So it stores every scan that it's done in the past fully within that on-prem environment. And it allows you to go backwards and forwards in time, pretty much using it like a time machine. So we can monitor things like configuration drift or compliance against DISA STIG over time, and many other things. Let me just step back out and bring you into the application itself. So that's how quick it is to add the product within your environment. This fake environment that I'm showing to you is running on AWS, and it's got a bit of a lag. I'm based in Europe, so and this is running in the US, so forgive me for that. It's obviously you don't get any lag in a live environment. There's a whole bunch of different screens that we have that that allow you to sort of investigate your environment in different ways. What I'm showing to you at the moment is the main dashboard. This is giving us a helicopter overview of the health of the environment at a glance. It looks like a lot of information when you first look at this, but once I walk you through it, you'll be able to understand it quite easily. This is just giving us a simple burn down chart of issues and non-compliances within the environment over time. It's really just a way that you can visualize how this environment is sort of going over time. The next thing we're covering off here is vulnerabilities. We can see that this environment at the moment is exposed to 2,823 vulnerabilities, and of those, 65 have been reported by CISA as exploited in the wild. So we incorporate CISA's known exploited vulnerabilities catalog into the vulnerability analysis and also the exploit database. So 15 of these have been reported as having exploits available. What we're covering off here is KB articles. So Runecast will automatically detect any exposure to VMware KB articles. We can see at the moment that we're exposed to 62 of these. What this means is that you're able to proactively remediate any exposure to KB articles before it actually causes any impact in the environment. So it's cutting out all of that troubleshooting and sort of firefighting that you might need to do. And we're doing the same with the logs here, where we've matched or correlated the logs in real time against the VMware knowledge base. We can see general best practices and other sort of more obscure best practices that we're covering in this environment, like PowerShell, SAP HANA for VMware, VMware on Nutanix. And at the moment, we can see that we're only 48% compliant with best practices. So the idea here is that you can come in the morning, you can just see at a glance, what the health is across this environment. In this particular case, I'm looking across a whole bunch of different environments. I've got a couple of vCenters, AWS, Kubernetes, NSXT, Azure, GCP, and then sort of Windows and Linux sprinkled across all of those. But in your own case, if you were to spin this up in a POC, you might find that you're only looking at perhaps some vCenters and operating systems. It would be much more clear. The next thing that we're covering off in this panel here is compliance. So, of course, DISA STIG, which we're going to focus in on today, but you can turn on many other security compliance profiles when you deploy it, and you can activate those when you need them as well. So DISA STIG is definitely going to be one that you're interested in. I do have a lot of DoD and federal government customers that need PCI DSS, where they're handling payroll, HIPAA for Veterans Affairs, anybody handling medical records, ISO 27001, CIS is often used as well. So any of these you can activate. We can see with DISA STIG, we're only 43% compliant at the moment. So we've got 914 DISA STIG controls that we're not compliant with. Custom profiles. If there's time, I'll show you through this. This is a way that you can group together checks from Runecast and follow those historically. The next panel here covers configuration drift. So we're going to monitor any changes in the configurations in all the different environments that you might be monitoring. And you can see at a glance here, if there's any color in these bars underneath, that means that there has been changes in the configurations between this scan, or the last scan, and the one prior to that. So we can see here with this particular vCenter, we have data stores, port groups, VMs, vCenter, IO devices, hosts, distributed virtual switches, distributed port groups, and clusters as well. So I've only got some color here on my data stores. 80% of the objects have changed. You can tell that by sort of how full that little bar is. Here we're only 40%, and here only 12% of the objects changed. And same again for the other vCenter, Kubernetes, and down here for operating systems as well. So yeah, it looks like a lot of information at the beginning, but very, very quick and easy when you come in the morning and sort of understand what the health of this environment is like. We give you some top-level metrics about the last scans and what they're picking up, and the worst issues that environment's facing as well. Let me take you straight into DISA STIG, given that that's what we're really here to look at. We have a dedicated screen, but we can use other screens here as well to focus in on things in a different way if we want to. If we go to the DISA STIG dedicated screen, we can see all of the checks that this is doing within the environment. Now I can focus in on different sections of DISA STIG, for example, and we cover all of the different check groups. So if we're looking at 8, vSphere 8, then we have the 12 check groups for that. If we're looking at vSphere 7, we have the 12 check groups for that as well. And then we go back to some earlier versions as well of vSphere. We're covering RHEL 8, RHEL 7, NSXT, and of course, Windows Server from 2016 through to 2022. We know that we need to improve this checkbox system here so that you're able to, just with one click select, say, vSphere 8 or vSphere 7 if you want. But the workaround that I use at the moment is I just store those in here as a bookmark. And so if I want to jump to just my 7.0 STIGs, I've got them in there. When I do that, yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. I get a bit nervous. I haven't done a webinar for many, many years. I normally just do one-on-one demos where it's much more interactive. So what we're doing here is we're automating perhaps more checks than you get with any other products. That's feedback that I've had from federal government customers. If we look at the numbers that we're automating here, I can show that to you here. For vSphere 7, there's 491 checks in total. We're automating 79% of those. 388 of them automated. 103 of those are manual checks. Here with vSphere 8, we're covering 71%. With 2016 from Windows, we're covering 74. 2019, 75. 2022, 75. RHEL 7, we're covering 88% of them, and RHEL 8, 86% of those are automated as well. So if I come back to this, I can select for checks that are manually answered. And when I do that, we give you the ability to answer and to provide an expiry date, if you would like. At the moment we have, you can say whether this is compliant, yes or no, and we're adding the ability to, or the option to say not available as well at the moment. But I can give this manual answer an expiry date. If this is a check that I feel that I can leave for some time, or if my policy is to come back and check this again in 2 weeks or in 1 month or 3 months or perhaps even a year, then I can give this an expiry date and I don't need to remember that date. Runecast will remember it for me. And then when that date comes and goes, it will then begin to show up as a failure and prompt me to come back and re-answer this. When we set up this webinar, it was before the vSphere 8 STIG, official STIGs were released. And one of the points that we put in the agenda was coverage for draft STIGs. We have a number of US federal government and DoD customers where they are typically deploying the latest versions of vSphere before the STIGs have been written. And for those customers, we cover the vSphere STIG readiness guides. So when vSphere 8 was released, we covered the vSphere STIG 8 readiness guides. And that enabled our customers to harden those environments against the STIG readiness guides, or draft STIGs as they call them. And then as soon as the vSphere 8 official STIGs were released, we covered those. So in the version of Runecast that I'm using at the moment, I can't actually show you the draft STIG coverage because we have covered 8, and we're waiting for vSphere 9 to be released. When that comes out and there's a STIG readiness guide for that, we would then automate checks against that STIG readiness guide. And that goes forward. So as far as I know, we're the only product that covers the draft STIGs when they're released as STIG readiness guides. But I can't show that to you today. The other thing that we allow you to do is to customize checks. So where some of these checks are against a value, we will also allow you to customize that value. And I'll come in here and give you an example of that. So here, we can give it a custom value, and we can scope exactly where we want to apply a custom value. And we can give different objects within the environment a custom value if we would want. So, we could do that. I can't, because it's not a live environment, add that custom value, but you could do that, and would then customize that for you as well. The other thing that we have within the product are remediation scripts. So let me just come back to all of STIG compliance. I'll clear these filters. And I can select where we have some remediation scripts. These are auto-populating remediation scripts. They will self-populate with the correct names of the objects within your environment. So where we have a remediation script, you can select exactly where you want to remediate, and you can read through this auto-populated script. In this particular case, it's Power CLI, but in many cases, we'll also have an Ansible playbook. You can then download that script or copy it to your clipboard. And if you run that script, it would mass remediate this particular non-compliance across this particular object. I'm just wondering if anybody has any questions about the STIG coverage. Feel free to pop it in the chat. It really is very, very simple and quick to set up. I mean, if you were to deploy this, you would have that STIG coverage within just a few minutes of the deployment, and you would be able to understand, exactly what your compliance is against that. Working with historical data, that's what I would like to cover next. Under this detected issues screen, we can access historical data. As I mentioned before, we're storing every scan that you've done in the past within that appliance. Here, we're just giving you a simple sort of burn down chart. We got some quick picks here. Like I'm showing the last 10 analysis, but we could go back, show the entire year there if we want. But if we want to dive into complex historical data, we do that with the compare analysis up here. So I can do that, jump into the compare analysis, and I can select some dates. In this environment, let's go back to 11th of October. And here, the last scans that we did were on January 14th. Perhaps I don't want this last one. I might want to pick that one there. I can hit compare, and then I can focus in on what I would like to see between those particular dates. We'll just give it a second to crunch that. Now, we're looking across everything at the moment, but let's go in and just select our STIG profile, which I can do here. And now we can see what's occurred. Well, actually, there hasn't been a whole lot. We didn't resolve anything there. All that we've done, but in between these two particular dates with STIGs is we have introduced newly discovered non-compliances. Of those, there's been an increase of 191 major level STIG non-compliances, 1.9 thousand medium level, 295 at the low, so it's 2.4K. If I want to jump into those specific ones, I can do that by clicking newly discovered here, and we can see that those have been newly discovered non-compliances during that time period. If I were to come back and stop focusing in on STIGs, maybe look at just everything that Runecast has discovered in this time. I'll clear filters. We can see that there's been a lot of issues within this fake environment, but we have resolved 39 of those. If I was to select there, just the ones that we've resolved, we can see exactly what they are. And I can jump in here and sort of see exactly what's going on. So in terms of working with historical data, Runecast allows you to very, very quickly access any information and sort of understand what has been going on within the environment over time. I just want to come back and focus on the exports as well. So with DISA STIG, and really from every screen within Runecast, you can filter for information that you would like, but then you can export that information. If I were perhaps to focus in on my 8.0, vSphere 8 STIGs, actually that's a bad example because we don't have vSphere 8 in this environment, but we'll come back to the 7 STIGs. I might want to export that. And I can export it as CSV, PDF, or if I want to drop this into STIG Viewer, I can export it as CKL format. We are also at the moment adding CKLB format as well, so that people that are using STIG Viewer 3.0 would be able to export those as well. All I need to do is select that, hit download, and then I've got that file. I can drop that straight into STIG Viewer. Yeah, so next step, let's come back and show you how we can work with Runecast, covering some of the other areas that we do as well. If I was to look at this detected issues screen, and if I'm a VMware engineer and I want to sort of understand what's going on in the environment, I can use these very, very simple filters here to focus in on things. I might want to know what are all the critical KB articles I'm exposed to at the moment that could possibly affect, for example, availability. And we could even go for a layer, say just on my compute layer. We can see now that out of the 7,066 issues affecting this environment, we've gone down to the 16 critical KBs that could affect availability on the compute layer. I can take you into one of these, and we give you in the UI the full detail from the KB article. Let's pick one that's a little bit longer, for example. So here we have a purple screen of death risk that we're exposed to. We always hyperlink to the source of the information. So here is the hyperlink to the original VMware KB article. And I'm showing you this just to, as an example, show you that all of the information in this KB article is presented in the Runecast UI, and you have access to that even in an air-gap site. The only difference that we make is the resolution is put at the end of the KB article. In the UI, you will always see the resolution at the top, highlighted with a little bit of green, because, you know, as engineers, that's immediately what you want to see when you open the product up. But the rest of that KB article is fully within the UI as well. Yeah, so this is one example, but of course, you know, I might want to focus in on those which have remediation scripts. Okay, bad example. I could clear the filters. I could select those. Of that 7,000 issues that are affecting this environment, I have a lot of remediation scripts that I could be using to mass remediate issues here and generating those. In this particular case, PowerShell or AWS CLI, it's affecting an AWS environment. The product will build a complete inventory for you across all of the different environments that you have. you're able to access that from this inventory view. So I can see my Windows and Linux. I can see my particular vCenters. I can drill down on these. Here we're showing you the total count of issues affecting the child objects. And here, the issues affecting this specific object highlighted in red. If I was to select an object, I see the issues pop up like this, and then I can access them here. Vulnerabilities coverage. So it's we allow you to triage or prioritize the vulnerabilities that are really the worst within your environment quite easily. We can do that by CVSS score here. Now I'm showing that, the most critical ones at the top here, but we also can select those that have been reported by CISA as exploited in the wild. And we could even go a step further and perhaps just those that also have an exploit kit available. So we can see in this particular case that this vulnerability has been reported by CISA as exploited in the wild. We give you the CISA KEV due date as well. And in this particular case, we have an exploit kit available. This link takes you through to the exploit database and all of the information available here as well. If I jump to we'll leave out container security, but obviously we do cover security in Kubernetes as well, but we won't focus in on that today. Configuration Vault. In this particular screen, we're allowing you to track configuration drift, but also any changes within configurations within these environments over time. We give you three sort of main views: inspector mode, baseline comparison, historical changes. Inspector mode's really simple. You're just going to see the particular objects, and at this moment we're focused in on a vCenter, but we could be looking at maybe operating systems, in this particular case Linux or Windows, or we might focus in on Kubernetes or something else. Let's just take it back to a vCenter, and we have 3 hosts here. So for this particular object, I can just see what the configurations are on that. But once we jump to the baseline comparison, and once again, leaving it on a vCenter and just looking at it, from the perspective of hosts, but we could look at it from any other perspective. I can select these arrows here to nominate anything to become a baseline. When I do that, I've got 2 ways I can look at this. Either I could jump into the other 2 hosts to look at the specific changes, or I can rip across to the right here, and I can see highlighted in red any of the parameters on the other hosts that differ or deviate from that baseline I've selected. If I want to remove that baseline, perhaps take the bottom one, I can do that as well. And then if I want to start jumping into individual objects, I can do that. Here we see highlighted in green the parameters on the baseline that I selected, and then highlighted in red on the right-hand side, the parameters that differ on this particular host that I've selected. Where there's a great deal of information like installed VIBs or advanced settings, we don't by default load that. If you want to see all of that extra information, just select, load the diff, and it will load out for you as well. If we jump into historical changes, and once again, let's just leave it on a vCenter and looking at it from the perspective of hosts, we give you the last analysis that was done, and then for a baseline analysis, we can go back in time. We can select one of those, and we hit apply, and we will see the drift on these 3 hosts between those 2 particular dates, May 28th and January 14th. And once again, we can rip across to the right here and quickly see highlighted in red deviation. And if we were working in a really long queue here, for example, looking at VMs where there would be, perhaps hundreds, we can any of these columns if it's noise or edit them as well. But then we can jump in and see here, for example, that highlighted in green are the parameters on the rearward date, the starting date, and then highlighted in red on the right-hand side are the parameters that differ at the end date as well. Best practices. We're going to audit constantly your compliance with best practices across all of the different systems that we're monitoring. And like I showed you in the beginning, when you deploy the product, you also have the opportunity to turn on or activate compliance monitoring against some more obscure best practices like PowerShell best practices or SAP HANA for VMware, that type of thing as well. This is very, very simple. Obviously, you're going to see an audit view where, passing or failing any of these. If I'm failing any of these particular checks, I can come in here all the way through the product. You'll see issue description, analysis findings, and note fields. Under the issue description, we give you a full description of that best practice. And under the analysis findings, I'm going to see exactly where I'm failing this particular best practice so that I can bring it back into compliance. Every time you run a scan, we will correlate your VMware inventory against the latest information from the VMware HCL, but we also allow you to fully simulate an upgrade. So in this particular case, we can see that we've picked up some non-compliances on 3 hosts against the VMware HCL. It looks a little bit scary when you see a lot of red here. And obviously, if it's green, everything's good. If it's red, there is a problem. But we can hover over here and we can see that this is just I/O devices, and there's not a whole lot of it. If we jump into this one, we can see the server is all green. Here we can see that we have just one particular I/O device where there is a driver firmware combination that's not supported on the VMware HCL. We always give you the fix. So here is the list of supported driver firmware combinations. And we also hyperlink directly to that entry on the VMware HCL. But the key, if you wanted to come to this, you don't need to go scraping around. But the key information that most people need is here in the UI. If we wanted to simulate an upgrade, we could do that. We could specify a specific part of the environment to upgrade if we would like. But in this case, let's just run across it all of it here. And all that we need to do is select a target ESXi version. Let's go with 8 update 2. And we hit simulate. Immediately we get a response back. It looks a little bit scary here with red, but if we look over here, it's not looking all that bad. So if we jump in here, we can see the server's all fine. It's just an I/O device in this particular case, just a driver firmware combination there that we would need to change. If we come in here, I can't remember if that's the same one I selected before or not, and same here as well, and so on and so forth. So this allows you, or certainly cuts out a huge amount of time if you're planning any upgrades and need to be compliant, obviously, with the VMware HCL. Capacity management. You must be sick of my voice by now. Let me handle, and forgive me because I get a bit nervous doing a webinar. I haven't done one for a long, long time, and my sort of brain freezes a little bit. So forgive me if it's been a little bit jumpy, but let me pass across to my colleague, Wade. He's able to show through capacity management much better than I am. Wade, would you be able to take over for a sec?
So in capacity management, Brian, has really walked you through and very nicely walked you through, how Runecast is presenting data. If you take a step back a little bit and understand what it's doing, it's correlating all of your configuration information and data and measuring that against several different sources of truth. And that's what we call it. Thousands of different knowledge repositories or articles or white papers or vendor documentation and stuff, and ultimately displaying to you where you need to pay attention, where you need to close gaps, where you need to close vulnerabilities, and optimally keep your operational posture as straight and as healthy as possible. The next step in what we're doing, and I know we're showing you a lot, it's because Runecast does a lot and has a lot of capabilities. The next step is capacity management. We have this flagged as new. It's been in our product now for several months, 5-6 months, but we keep enhancing it. So we keep putting this flag on it to draw people's attention to it, to understand how we're developing it and how it's growing. For now, capacity management for us is giving you a snapshot of your cluster performance, and ultimately coming in here and giving you the ability to see how things are at a quick glance, because you know Runecast is doing so many things. You don't have to go outside of this to another product and look at your cluster performance. You can just come into Runecast since you're already in there and get a glance. So you can look at your CPU usage. What are your ratios across your different clusters? Memory usage, memory ratios, trending. You can see how things have been stacking up over time. Obviously, right, I can select whatever clusters and get multiple populated here in my graph for trending, and then drill down into some of the details down below. So overall, cluster and capacity management, to give you a feel. What our development team did, which I love, is they took this a couple of steps further and built in a couple of simulations. And this isn't something that you normally find in off-the-shelf products. But what we give you the ability to do in here is simulate host failures. So you can simulate as many host failures as you want to see how ultimately that would impact your cluster, right? So I can come in here and select and simulate, if I had 2 hosts fail, what type of impact is that going to have to my cluster? Most of us build at least, one HA server, for failover, but not many of us build 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, right? That's capacity that isn't being utilized, blah, 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 blah. But you can see overall, if your clusters are 50% utilized, then, you could take probably 3 down, depending on the size of the cluster, and see ultimately how that would impact. I can go back up here and see what's going to happen if I lose 1 host. I should still operate fairly decently. One use case I received back from somebody I was talking to was, if you do have clusters that aren't highly utilized, you could come in here and you could simulate and get an idea of the next maintenance phase that you have with the host in your cluster, and just use Runecast to say, hey, I know I can take 3 hosts out of this cluster and it's still healthy and be up and running fine. I can enter all 3 of those in maintenance mode at the same time, perform work at the same time, so I don't have to do them one at a time, type of thing. So that was a really nice use case that I had never thought of that, and I had an actual client mention that to me, and I really liked that idea. The second simulator we build in is virtual machine deployment. Historically, we have our cluster, say we're, close to capacity, or, we're running comfortably now, but we don't know how much load we can add to it. We give you the ability to simulate. So you can come in here, simulate additional VMs being deployed to those clusters, and see how that impact might happen. So say I want to add 10 VMs, give it generic CPU memory allocations, usage percentages, and I'm not going to change anything in here, but you can put whatever you want in here. So can my cluster handle 10 new VMs with these parameters? Click simulate, and now we get a quick picture of a simulation as if I added those 10 VMs. So obviously that puts me at 127% CPU, 118 memory, depending on what my overcommit thresholds are that I've set for myself. 10 may be too many for this cluster. So might want to add a host, might want to, if I have that demand and need to add those additional virtual machines. So for now, that's what we're doing with capacity management. I know that this is because it's new to the product and we never leave well enough alone. We're going to constantly be developing this. We're getting feedback from people currently using it. Some feedback I've gotten more than once is virtual machine right sizing, right? So you saw the simulation, you can add certain parameters in there, but somebody wanted somebody, I've gotten feedback where they want to reverse engineer that, of the resources currently allocated to virtual machines. What's the utilization threshold, right? Can I scale some of those resources back? These machines aren't using what they're allocated, those types of things. So anyway, the point of that is we're going to constantly be developing this. So I look forward to this piece of it. Because again, very quick, very easy, very intuitive on how you can, get data. And in here, as Brian mentioned, almost every screen we have within the product, you can generate a report with the data you're viewing. So if I want to kick out a report on this, send it to somebody, I can simply do that by clicking a button. So that is capacity management. Brian, would you like me to cover KBs?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Um, so KB articles, very similar to what Brian's already shown you. So what we've done is analyze your environment, right? Quick scan using our artificial intelligence, taking any sort of work off your plate whatsoever and doing this automatically, and ultimately showing you by severity where you have risk in your configuration against a known issue that VMware's documented. Okay, so by severity, critical, major, medium, and low, what are we discovering in your environment that needs resolution? You're going to see criticals a lot of times for VMware specifically are going to be related to purple screens. You know, obviously critical is the worst thing that can happen for VMware host, but we have some other things, you know, the major, mediums, lows, uh, CPU timer issues, blah, blah, blah. But the point of this is, again, automatically doing this in a matter of seconds, presenting all of this data to you so you know at a glance, whether you're in the dashboard inventory view, everything else Brian just showed you, you can actually get a really quick feel for where you're stacking up and what you need to pay attention to. With all of the filter options in your views, you can come in and just sort and filter on criticals affecting certain things. Because I'm saying that because a lot of people, you know, I'm getting feedback, you know, I ran a scan, I have so many things, I don't know where to begin, right? Well, we make it very easy to prioritize your actions, either by severity or like in the vulnerabilities, the CISA scores, the vulnerability exploitations. We give you all the data that you need to really sit back and say, okay, this is my priority now, I'm going to work from this. But again, you know, I open the screen immediately, I'm going to see how many objects I have failing this, how many I have passing it. Um, as Brian indicated, we're always presenting you with a resolution. So we don't just flag and show you some obscure error code and then, you know, kind of go off on your own to figure out where this exists in the environment and how to resolve it. We provide it for you. And under findings, we're going to list those objects that are passing and failing. So this helps as well to understand current health state, right? So 3 and 3 in this small lab environment, I can generate a report, provide it to anybody asking, how do you stack up against this currently at this moment? I can provide that information and data to them very easily. So that's capacity management KB articles. Brian, do you want to cover logs or do you want me to
Yeah,
continue?
sure. No, I'll
Okay.
do that. Yeah.
Okay, let me go ahead and stop.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, with the logs, what Runecast is doing is really targeted log analysis, which is quite different to Log Insight or Splunk. We don't keep all the logs like those products. We only keep the problematic logs, logs that either match to known KB articles or have specific keywords within them that are, you know, indicative of problematic behavior. So in this particular screen, log KB articles, what we're showing you are these needles in the haystack that we've found, and it's cutting out all that sort of investigative work that you would normally have to do. If we jump into one of these, we give you the KB article that matches with the patterns in these particular logs. So this explains, you know, what the issue is, what you need to do to fix that, and then under the findings, of course, we show you where you're being affected, timestamp, program, syslog message as well. So yeah, it just cuts out a huge amount of work for users. We have log inspector screen as well. Not every customer that we deal with in the DoD or Fed space has log insight, and this is really kind of like Log Insight Lite. What we're doing, it's very simple to use. It's almost deceptively simple. So it's worth me explaining what we're doing here so that you would get a better idea. I'm using this fake environment, whereas Wade is using a live environment. It didn't load for some reason from this AWS account. So what we're showing you here is the information that's come in for the dates that we're focused in on. Now, by default, we keep the logs, these problematic logs, for 60 days. So we could go back a couple of months if we want. We're just looking at a 2-day period here, and that's fine. Let's just leave it here. Now, during this 2-day period, we've picked up these keywords. So failed to, NMP, unable to, SCSI command, could not, and error. And we're just showing you in this colorful graph above that how many times those have occurred. Now, that's not really useful in itself, but we can start to ask it questions, and that's where it becomes useful. The first way is using these magnifying glasses, and then the second way is by focusing in on a keyword. So to use these magnifying glasses, I might want to focus in on hosts and just see which of these are the noisiest. I can select that one there. And then I might want to look at the processes that are causing the bulk of these. Let's go with OFSD. So now we're seeing that those particular logs that match to that host name and this particular process, and we can sort of start reading through those if we want. I've got a problem, I think, with my Chrome version. No, there it is. Sorry, I did this before, and it, for some reason, the magnifying glass didn't pop up, but I can focus in on a keyword like that. When I do that, it will give me a magnifying glass, and I could focus in just on that particular keyword if I wanted to. If we want to step out of that, we can focus in on a keyword. We can come in here and select fail to, like I've just done now. And I then see all the fragments of log messages that contain the fail to keyword. I can do things like click any of these out if I want to, but if I wanted to get to this first one here, and there's so many, I can just type a differentiating word like object here in the search box, hit enter. When I do that, I'm then just focused in on, actually, I've got two. Let me get rid of that one. Now I can see for failed to get object, I can come in here, hover this, and in the tooltip there, I get the time. So this is 8 o'clock in the evening, January 15th, 9 in the evening, January 15th, and so on and so forth. These times might coincide with issues that I'm having and help me to narrow down, perhaps this is what I want to look at. So very, very simple, sort of built by engineers for engineers, no bells and whistles, but enables you to investigate problems within the logs. Now, sometimes you're going to have very, very good reasons for wanting to suppress checks in Runecast. And we can do this with anything. If we would look at hardware compatibility, and sorry, because I was nervous before, all the blood left my head and I forgot to cover quite a few things. But if we jump into any of these particular issues here, the VMware HCL is only as good as the information that the vendors put into it. And there can be inconsistencies, obviously, with that huge amount of data. So if this shows up, for example, as a fail, and you were to come in here and you say, well, listen, I'm really comfortable with where I'm at. I really don't agree with the HCL. Then I can't do it in the fake environment, but I could hit override. And when I do that, it allows me to either override this particular HCL check globally or just in this one particular instance. And then I would not be alerted to this going forward unless there was a change in the VMware HCL or if there was a change in the hardware within my environment. But I would then get a little notification here on the screen showing me that overrides are actually engaged on any of these as well. The other way that we work with filters is with the other screen. So with hardware compatibility, we call it an override. With everything else in the product, we call it a filter. And an example that I often use is under best practices, but we could equally do this with DISA STIG checks, for example. There's two different ways to do this. First way is inside every check. So this is an example some of you might have seen before if you've been in a demo with me, but say, for example, you've got a dev cluster, and for your own specific reasons, you don't want to be following the SSH best practices for that dev cluster for your own reasons. So you don't want Runecast alerting you to something that you know that you're not doing. We give you a default filter name, but you really want to give the filter a name that makes sense to you. So something like SSH, okay, in dev. We can give it a much longer description if we want, if we're working in a team up to 255 characters, perhaps explaining what this is. But then in the most granular ways, right down to the VM level or, whatever we want, we could select exactly where we want to suppress this check. That could be at the VM level or data center level or cluster level or host level, whatever. And then if I hit create filter, which I can't in the fake environment, I would no longer be alerted to this particular SSH best practice on that particular VM. And then I can manage these, and this is the second place where I can create them, but it gives me even more flexibility under settings, filters. So when we come here, when it loads, you're going to see that there are many little filters that we've created within this fake environment. And you can come in here. You can see that we can turn these on or off whenever we want. So when you create a filter, it's not changing any of the data within the historical data of Runecast. All that it's doing is it's filtering the information that you'll get in the UI and any reports when you've got that filter engaged. And you can disengage that filter whenever you want as well. So this can be used in a bunch of different ways, but you might want to just filter out noise when you're working on something. So you can create filters really, really quickly, just with a couple of clicks. You can turn them on when you want. You can delete them whenever you want. You can edit them on the fly, or you can create them from scratch here as well. But if we jump into one of these to edit it, you can see once again on the left-hand side of the screen, we have access to all of our inventory. But now on the right-hand side of the screen, we have access to all of the checks that this particular Runecast deployment is doing, given all the different options we've turned on, like different security standards and stuff like that. And in this view, I can work in a many-to-many relationship on both sides of the screen. So if I wanted to create one massive filter where I wanted to turn on or off a whole bunch of functionality at the same time, I could do that from here. But it just depends on your particular use case. You might find that, in your particular use case, you just want to create individual filters like we have here. Yeah, so that's one way that you can work with that. If we come back here, I'm sure that I've forgotten to show a few things. One thing that I didn't cover when I was showing the deployment, obviously, was the operating systems. Now, if we want to activate operating systems, we do have an agentless solution that we've released in early user access just a couple of months ago, but it's a work in progress, and we don't recommend it for using in production environments at the moment. For the moment, we're still using an agent. We use OS Query. None of my DoD customers or federal government customers have a problem with it. It's open source, perhaps the most secure agent to use. But you would just install it as agents and on your Windows and Linux instances, and then that would enable you to collect data from them and DISA STIG compliance on those as well. We do have obviously other aspects to the product. For example, you can create different organizations, and really it's like role-based access control light. So you can control which users have access to which systems. You can define, user rights, whether it's read-only or admin rights, that type of thing. We've also built other functionality for military customers. For example, some customers want to be able to monitor remote or for example, mobile data centers. Typically, they'll be uploading data from those, say, for example, battleships or battlefield data centers on a truck. They would upload data from those to a central SOC headquarters over secure satellite connections. And this enterprise console enables you to turn any Runecast instance into a central monitoring point for other Runecast appliances. If you do have a remote appliance here, it shows up as a hyperlink. There's just a couple here that we've added. The rest of the analysis here is different systems that are connected to the local analyzer. And what you're seeing here is just pretty much a condensed version of that dashboard that I showed to you at the beginning. So you can see the particular systems, what type of of technology stack it is when the last analysis was done, because these are typically done over secure satellite connections. They might be a little bit old. You can see the number of issues affecting it, how many are critical, major, medium, and low, the number of issues affecting logs, for example, vulnerability compliance, security compliance. So this is only 69% compliant with security standards that have been activated on it, best practice compliance, and that type of thing as well. Really, I think that's everything. Actually, we still have a couple of minutes left. Wade, I don't know whether you'd have time to do this, but we should talk about integrations. There's and if you're able to show the vSphere client just quickly before we finish, it'd be nice.
Okay.
But hang on, I've forgotten Q&A. So just quickly, we could quickly show you the vSphere client integration that we have. It just means that you have access to all of the Runecast data directly in the vSphere client where you're working most of the time. And that includes STIG compliances as well. But does anybody have any questions? We've only got 3 minutes left on the clock. Feel free to type any questions that you might have in the chat. We also have a questionnaire on the webinar. Misha, do you want to post that in the chat, the questionnaire?
And while she's doing that, in my screen, I'm showing you the vCenter that we have connected to our lab environment. So as Brian indicated, we do have a vCenter client plugin. So you go through and enable the plugin ultimately in your vCenter server, and then under your monitoring tab, you're going to then see Runecast Analyzer. So in here, you can't, because most SEs spend, the majority of their time in vCenter. So you can, instead of having to jump back and forth between the Analyzer web client and the vCenter, you can see the Runecast findings within here. And there's a certain amount of, manipulation you can do, I guess might be the best way, but you can see details. A lot of the details and information that we showed you in the product will be available in here. So, I mean, I could do some filtering and so forth and just look at what's occurring in the environment. So that is one major piece for VMware environments. Another piece for integration that's big with a lot of clients is we have full REST API access to our information. So anything that Runecast, any data that generates or stores is available via API calls. And that's how most of our clients integrate with third-party applications. So I just want to highlight that as well.
Thanks very much, Wade.
You bet.
There's also a ServiceNow plugin. Jira, of course, is integrated. And there's a full API within the product that's, it's fully documented within the product as well. And there are endpoints for pretty much everything. I mean, the Runecast user interface is built upon the public API that's documented within the product. That's everything that we have time for you today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. My colleague Misha has just posted a feedback form in the chat. If anybody would like to leave any feedback in the form for us, it would be very, very useful going forward. And if anybody would like to know more about Runecast or to spin up a POC, all that you need to do is reach out to sales@runecast.com, and I would get in touch with you. I could always arrange a full product demonstration for your team. I'm much better in a interactive session than I am with a webinar. I do that all the time. So we'd love to hear from you if you would like to know more. Thank you, everyone.